Some women are born to break. Alara Whitford was born to endure. When a runaway carriage threatens to end her on a lonely autumn road, the widow doesn't run. She plants her feet and faces death head-on, because surviving has never been about luck. What she pulls from the wreckage changes everything. A duke, bleeding and unconscious, whose world of power collides with her fortress of scars. This is a story about two people who refuse to bend, until they discover that breaking might be the only way to become whole. Stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The November wind cut through the English countryside like a blade looking for bone. Alara Whitford pulled her wool cloak tighter, but it wasn't the cold that made her jaw clench. It was the empty road stretching before her, the crumbling stone walls of her estate rising behind her, and the weight of another winter pressing down on her shoulders. 3 years. 3 years since Thomas died and left her with land, debts, and a title that meant nothing when creditors came knocking. 3 years of learning that survival wasn't romantic or noble. It was brutal, repetitive, and lonely as hell. She'd ridden into the village that morning to negotiate with the blacksmith. Again. The man owed her for grain, but his wife had just birthed twins, and Alara had walked away with promises instead of coin. Stupid. Soft. Exactly the kind of mistake Thomas would have scolded her for. But Thomas wasn't here anymore. The mare beneath her snorted, ears flicking forward. Alara straightened in the saddle, scanning the tree line. The road curved ahead, disappearing into a tunnel of bare oak branches that clawed at the gray sky. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Then she heard it. Distant at first. The thunder of hooves, the crack of wood straining against speed, the high-pitched scream of horses driven past reason. Alara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She knew that sound. A carriage, out of control. Easy, she murmured to her mare, but her hands were already moving, pulling the reins, turning the horse sideways across the narrow road. The sound grew louder, closer, violent. Any sane person would have moved. Alara stayed. She didn't think about it. Thinking was a luxury for people with choices. She just reacted. The same way she'd reacted when the creditors threatened to seize her home, when the roof collapsed during the storm, when she'd found Thomas cold in their bed and had to keep breathing anyway. The carriage exploded around the bend. 4 black horses, eyes rolling white with terror, mouths foaming around the bits. The driver was gone. Thrown or fallen, it didn't matter. The reins dragged uselessly in the dirt. Behind them, a massive black carriage careened wildly, wheels lifting off the ground on every turn, the whole thing seconds from splintering apart. Alara's mare screamed and reared. She held on, legs clamped tight, one hand fisted in the mane. "Hold!" she shouted, not sure if she was talking to the horse or herself. The lead horse saw her. Its eyes locked on hers for a single, terrible moment. Then it tried to turn. Too fast. Too sharp. The carriage yawed hard to the left. One wheel caught a rut. The horses tangled, stumbled. The world became a mess of screaming animals, splintering wood, and the deep, earth-shaking boom of something very large hitting something very solid. Alara's mare bolted sideways, nearly throwing her. She fought for control, dragged the horse around in a tight circle, forcing it to stop, to stand, to witness what she'd done. The carriage lay on its side in the ditch, one wheel still spinning slowly. 2 horses were down, thrashing in the traces. The other 2 stood trembling, heads low, sides heaving. Steam rose from their sweat-slicked bodies in the cold air. Silence settled like snowfall. Then a groan, low, male, edged with pain, came from inside the wreckage. "Damn it!" Alara swung down from the saddle, her boots hitting the frozen ground hard. Her hand shook as she tied the mare to a tree branch. The smart thing would be to ride for help. Let someone else deal with this. Let someone else... Another groan, weaker this time. "Damn it," she said again, and started toward the carriage. The door faced skyward, hinges twisted. Alara grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. She braced her foot against the carriage frame and hauled with everything she had. The door gave with a shriek of protesting metal. Darkness inside. The smell of expensive leather, wood polish, and blood. "Is anyone alive in there?" Silence. Then faint. Help! Alara's jaw tightened. She looked around, spotted a fallen branch, and wedged it under the door to hold it open. Then she climbed onto the side of the carriage and peered down into the dim interior. A man lay crumpled against what used to be the far wall, now the floor. Even in the shadows, she could see the dark stain spreading across his white shirt. His coat was fine wool, his boots polished. Quality, money, trouble. "Can you move?" she called down. No answer. "Of course you can't." She dropped down inside, landing hard on the slanted floor. The space was tight, claustrophobic, tilted at a sickening angle. The man was bigger than she'd thought, tall, broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd never missed a meal in his life. Blood matted his dark hair. A gash above his temple still seeped red. His breathing was shallow, rapid. Shock, probably. Maybe worse. Alara checked his neck for a pulse. Strong and steady, thank God. She ran her hands down his arms, his ribs, his legs, looking for breaks. He groaned when she pressed his left side. Ribs, maybe cracked, but nothing obviously shattered. "Wake up," she said, patting his face. Nothing too gentle about it. "Come on. I didn't stop that carriage just so you could die on me anyway." His eyelids flickered, dark lashes against pale skin. Then his eyes opened, gray, like winter fog, and confused as hell. "What?" His voice cracked. He tried to sit up, gasped, and fell back. "Don't move, you've cracked something. Maybe your ribs, maybe your skull, maybe both." Alara grabbed his arm. "But we can't stay here. This whole thing could collapse. Can you stand if I help you?" He stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language, probably in shock. Definitely used to people doing things for him, not to him. "Listen to me." She leaned closer, letting him see her face clearly. "I'm going to get you out of here, but you need to work with me. Understand?" Something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Awareness. He nodded, just barely. "Good. On 3. 1. She didn't wait for 3, just hauled him up, shouldering his weight before he could protest. He was heavy, solid muscle under the expensive clothes, and he swore viciously as his ribs protested the movement. "Creative," Alara muttered, "but save your breath." Getting him out was ugly. She had to half carry, half drag him up through the door opening, using the bench seat for leverage. He helped where he could, but his left leg wasn't cooperating, and by the time they tumbled out onto the road, they were both breathing hard. Alara lowered him against the carriage wheel, careful of his ribs. His face had gone gray, and sweat beaded his forehead despite the cold. "Stay," she ordered, like he was a dog. She moved to the horses. The 2 that were down weren't getting up. One had a broken leg, the other was caught wrong in the traces, neck bent at an angle that made Alara's stomach turn. She drew the small knife she kept in her boot and cut them free as gently as she could, whispering things that probably didn't help but felt necessary anyway. The standing horses were in better shape. Scared, exhausted, but whole. She unhitched them carefully, checking for injuries. One had a deep cut on its shoulder, but it would heal. The other just trembled and let her work. When she turned back, the man was watching her. His eyes had cleared some, focusing with an intensity that made her want to step back. She didn't. "Who are you?" His voice was rough but steady. Educated accent. Upper class, definitely. "The person who just saved your life." "I gathered that. I meant your name." Alara wiped blood, his, mostly, on her cloak. "Alara Whitford. And you're bleeding on my road, so let's save the introductions. Can you ride?" He glanced at the horse, then at his leg. "Probably not well." "Good thing I didn't ask if you could do it well." She brought the calmer horse over, positioned it next to the wheel. "Use the wheel to mount. I'll steady you." "This is—" He stopped, jaw working like he was chewing on words he wanted to say but couldn't quite justify. "I can't just—" "You can, and you will. Because the sun's going down. You're injured, and I'm not leaving you here to freeze." Alara crossed her arms. "Your choice. Ride with me, or explain to the crows tomorrow why your pride was more important than your survival." He stared at her. For a moment, she thought he might actually argue. Then something like respect, or maybe just resignation, crossed his face. "Help me up." It wasn't graceful. He cursed twice more getting into the saddle, and Alara had to all but lift his injured leg over the horse's back. But he stayed on, white-knuckled and sweating, while she mounted her own mare. "My estate is 2 miles north," she said. "Think you can manage that?" "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile under different circumstances. "Then I suppose I'll manage." They rode in silence. Alara kept glancing back, watching for signs he was going to fall. He didn't, just sat rigid in the saddle, jaw clenched, breathing carefully through what had to be significant pain. Stubborn. She could respect that. The sun was nearly gone when Whitford Manor came into view, a sprawling stone house that had seen better days. Half the shutters hung crooked, the gardens were overgrown, and the fountain in the courtyard had been dry for 2 years. But it was solid, safe, hers. Alara dismounted and moved to help him down. He leaned on her more than probably wanted to admit, and they stumbled toward the door together like a pair of drunks. "Mrs. Hewitt!" Alara kicked the door open. "Mrs. Hewitt, I need hot water and bandages, now!" A gray-haired woman appeared from the back hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at the blood-soaked stranger and didn't even blink. "Kitchen or parlor?" "Parlor. Closer." They got him to the settee, another piece of furniture Thomas had loved, and Alara couldn't bear to sell. The man collapsed onto it with a groan, eyes closing. "Don't you dare pass out on me now," Alara said, already pulling off his coat. The shirt underneath was ruined. She grabbed her knife and cut it away without ceremony. His eyes snapped open. "What are you—" "Checking for internal bleeding. Hold still." The gash on his head looked worse than it was. Scalp wounds always bled like hell. But his ribs were another story. Purple bruises already bloomed across his left side, and he sucked air through his teeth when she pressed gently. "Cracked, probably," she said. "Maybe broken. Hard to tell without a surgeon." "I've had worse." She looked at him, really looked, saw the old scar along his jaw, another on his collarbone, the way he held pain like someone familiar with it. "I believe you," she said quietly. Mrs. Hewitt arrived with supplies. Together they cleaned him up, bandaged what needed bandaging, and made him as comfortable as possible. He didn't complain, just watched Alara with those unsettling gray eyes, like he was cataloging everything about her. "You should rest," she said finally, straightening. Her back ached. Her hands were cramping. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I should thank you." "You just did." "Properly, He paused and something crossed his face. Calculation, maybe, or decision. "My name is Darian Vexley, Duke of Ashborough." The room went very quiet. Alara stared at him. Then she started laughing, not because it was funny, but because of course. Of course she'd just pulled a duke from a wrecked carriage. Of course the universe had decided to make her day that much more complicated. "Something amusing?" His tone was dry. "Everything." She pressed her hands to her face, still half laughing. "Absolutely everything about this disaster. I fail to see. You're a duke." She dropped her hands. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've just brought to my door?" His expression darkened. "I didn't ask you to save me." "No, you just bled all over my settee. Much better." They glared at each other. The fire crackled in the hearth. Mrs. Hewitt quietly excused herself. Finally, Darian said, "I'll leave. Tomorrow. As soon as I can ride." "You can't even stand." Then the day after. "You have cracked ribs and a head wound. I'm aware of my injuries. Are you aware that you're being an ass?" His jaw dropped. Actually dropped. Like no one had ever spoken to him that way before. They probably hadn't. Alara stood. "You'll stay until you're healed enough to travel safely. Not because I like you. I don't know you well enough to like you. But because letting you leave in this condition would be stupid, and I've made enough stupid choices for one day." She walked to the door, then paused. "Mrs. Hewitt will bring you dinner. Don't get up. Don't try to leave. And don't die in my house. I've had enough death here already." She didn't wait for a response, just climbed the stairs to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed she used to share with Thomas. Her hands were still shaking. A duke. In her house. Bleeding on her furniture. Complicating everything with his title, his money, his world that had nothing to do with hers. She should have left him in that ditch. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. She couldn't have walked away any more than she could stop breathing. It wasn't kindness. Alara had learned that kindness was a luxury 3 years ago. It was something deeper, simpler. She'd stopped the carriage because she could, because someone had to. Because the world had taken so much from her that refusing to let it take one more thing, even a stranger's life, felt like the only real choice she had. Alara lay back on this bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd deal with the consequences. Tonight, she'd just survive, like she always did. The next morning arrived gray and bitter, frost painting the windows white. Alara woke before dawn, old habit, and dressed quickly. Her body ached from yesterday's chaos, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. You didn't have to listen. She found Darian exactly where she'd left him, still on the settee. Someone, Mrs. Hewitt probably, had brought him a blanket. He was awake, staring at the cold fireplace. "You didn't die," Alara said, starting a new fire. "Good. Your confidence is inspiring," she snorted. "How are the ribs?" "Painful." "That's honest, at least." The kindling caught. She added larger pieces, watching the flames grow. "Can you eat?" "I should—" He started to sit up, gasped, and fell back. "Damn it!" "That's what I thought. I'll bring you something." She stood, dusting off her hands. "Try not to move. You'll just make it worse." "I'm not used to being idle." "Get used to it. You're going to be idle for a while." She left before he could argue, heading to the kitchen where Mrs. Hewitt was already working. "How is our unexpected guest?" the older woman asked, pulling bread from the oven. "Alive. Stubborn. Irritating." "So, recovering well?" Alara almost smiled. "Apparently, he'll need food, something simple. His stomach's probably a mess after yesterday." "I'll prepare a tray." Mrs. Hewitt gave her a knowing look. "You do realize who he is, don't you?" "A duke? Yes, he told me." "Not just any duke, Alara. The Duke of Ashborough. Controls half the northern territories. Sits on the king's council. People cross streets to avoid displeasing him." "Then it's a good thing I already displeased him by cutting up his shirt." "I'm serious." "So am I." Alara poured herself tea, letting the heat seep into her cold hands. "He's just a man, Mrs. Hewitt. Powerful, rich, probably dangerous in ways I don't understand yet. But still, just a man. He bleeds like anyone else." "That's what worries me." Alara looked at her. This woman who'd stayed when everyone else left, who'd worked for promises instead of pay, who'd become more family than servant. "I didn't have a choice yesterday," she said quietly. "You know that." "I know, but choices have consequences, and powerful men always collect their debts, one way or another." The words settled heavy in the kitchen. Alara drank her tea and didn't argue, because Mrs. Hewitt wasn't wrong. She brought him breakfast an hour later. He'd managed to sit up, but the effort had cost him. Sweat beaded his forehead, and his breathing was shallow. "You should have waited for help," she said, setting the tray down. "I've been waiting. You didn't come." "I had other things to do, like running an estate." "With how many staff?" She bristled. "That's none of your concern." "It is, if I'm staying here. I need to understand." He stopped, studying her face. "You're alone, except for the woman who let me in yesterday." "Mrs. Hewitt, and we manage fine." "I'm sure you do." His tone suggested he thought otherwise. "But that's none of your business," Alara finished. "You're a guest, an involuntary one, but still, you don't get to judge my household." "I wasn't judging?" "Yes, you were. I can hear it in your voice. The same tone every creditor, every merchant, every man who's walked through that door uses. Pity mixed with contempt. Poor widow, can't manage without a man. That's not what isn't it?" She crossed her arms. "You've been awake less than a day and you're already calculating, measuring, deciding what I can and can't handle." Darian met her glare with one of his own. "You're putting words in my mouth." "Am I?" "Then what were you going to say?" "That it's impressive. What you've done here. Alone." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples she didn't expect. Alara stared at him. "You're lying." "I'm not. Men like you don't find women like me impressive. We're complications, problems to solve or ignore." "Maybe other men." He shifted, winced, but held her gaze. I'm not other men. No, you're worse. You're a duke, which means you're used to people doing exactly what you want, exactly when you want it. Well, this isn't your estate, and I'm not your subject. So if you plan to stay here until you heal, you'll do it on my terms. Understood? Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something else. Interest, maybe. Or challenge. Understood, he said finally. Good. She turned to leave, then stopped. And eat your breakfast. You need your strength if you're going to heal. Yes, ma'am. She almost missed the amusement in his voice. Almost. 3 days passed. Then 5. Darian's ribs remained tender but improved enough that he could move without gasping. The head wound scabbed over, healing clean. He was stronger, steadier, closer to being able to leave. Alara told herself she'd be relieved when he was gone. She was lying. Not because she liked him, she barely knew him beyond the brittle politeness they'd established. But his presence had shifted something in the house. Made it feel less empty, less like a mausoleum of her old life. She hated that. On the 6th day, she found him in the library. He'd made it there himself, limping but mobile, and now stood examining the shelves with obvious interest. I didn't give you permission to wander, she said from the doorway. He didn't turn. I didn't realize I needed it. You're in my house. And I've been going mad stuck in that parlor. He pulled a book down, examined the spine. Philosophy, history, agricultural treatises. Interesting collection. They were my husband's. Were? He doesn't read anymore? He's dead. The words came out flat, mechanical. She'd said them so many times they'd lost all weight. Darian finally turned to look at her. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't kill him. She moved into the room, straightening books that didn't need straightening. Fever did that 3 years ago. Very democratic fever. Doesn't care about title or money. No, it doesn't. Something in his tone made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not pity, exactly. Understanding, maybe. You've lost someone, she said. Not a question. My brother. 2 years ago. Riding accident. I'm sorry. Don't be. He echoed her words back with a slight smile. You didn't kill him. Despite herself, Alara almost laughed. Touché. They stood there in the dusty library, 2 people bound by loss and the strange circumstances that had thrown them together. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either, just present. Why did you stop the carriage? Darian asked suddenly. You could have been killed. I know. Then why? Alara considered lying, considered shrugging it off with something dismissive. But something about the way he asked, genuinely curious, not judging, made her answer honestly. Because I could, she said. Because someone had to. And because, she paused, searching for words. Because the world's taken enough. I wasn't going to let it take one more thing if I could prevent it. Even a stranger's life? Especially a stranger's life. I didn't know who you were. You could have been anyone, a merchant, a farmer, a criminal. She met his eyes. But you were a person in trouble, and I had the means to help. That's all that mattered in that moment. He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. That's not how most people think. I'm not most people. No. His voice was quiet. You're not. The way he said it made something flutter in her chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. She pushed it away. You should rest, she said too quickly. You're supposed to be recovering, not exploring. I've been resting for days. I'm fine. Your definition of fine and mine are clearly different. Clearly. But he moved toward the door, favoring his injured side. As he passed her, he paused. Thank you for answering honestly. Most people wouldn't. Most people haven't had to. She didn't look at him. When you lose everything, you learn there's no point in pretty lies. The truth's going to hurt either way. She felt rather than saw his nod. Then he was gone, limping back toward the parlor, leaving her alone with her husband's books and the uncomfortable realization that she didn't hate having him here as much as she should. Mrs. Hewitt found her 10 minutes later, still standing in the library. You're going to have to decide soon, the older woman said without preamble. Decide what? Whether you're going to let him leave or ask him to stay. Alara's head snapped up. I'm not asking him anything. He'll leave when he's healed. Will he? Why wouldn't he? He has an estate, responsibilities, a life that has nothing to do with mine. Then why hasn't he mentioned sending for anyone? For staff to collect him? For a doctor? The question hung in the air. Alara had wondered the same thing but hadn't wanted to examine it too closely. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe you should ask him. Maybe I should mind my own business. Mrs. Hewitt smiled, sad and knowing. My dear, he became your business the moment you pulled him from that carriage. The only question now is what kind of business he'll be. She left Alara with that thought, uncomfortable and persistent as a stone in a shoe. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She gave up trying around midnight and went downstairs, intending to make tea. Instead, she found Darian in the kitchen, sitting at the scarred wooden table with a candle burning low. Can't sleep either? She asked. He looked up, unsurprised by her presence. Ribs. They're better, but lying down still hurts. I know. She moved to the stove, starting water for tea. You should have said something. Mrs. Hewitt can make you a draft. I don't want to be unconscious. I've been unconscious enough. Fair point. She brought 2 cups to the table, sitting across from him. The candlelight carved shadows across his face, making him look older, tired, human. Can I ask you something? She said. Can I stop you? Probably not. Then ask. Why haven't you sent for anyone? You're a duke. You must have people, staff, family, someone who's wondering where you are. He was quiet for a long moment, fingers wrapped around his cup, staring into the tea like it held answers. I have people, he said finally, hundreds of them, staff who depend on me for their livelihoods, a mother who will be worried sick, a sister who's probably organizing a search party. He paused. And I haven't sent for any of them because the moment I do, this ends. This? He gestured vaguely. This? Being just a man, not a duke, not a title, not a walking collection of responsibilities and expectations, just someone who got hurt and had to accept help from a stranger who didn't give a damn about any of it. Alara understood, maybe more than he knew. You want to be anonymous. I want to be normal, just for a little while longer. He looked at her directly. Is that selfish? Probably, but I understand it. Do you? I'm a widow running an estate alone with barely enough money to pay my one remaining servant. I've had to fight for every scrap of respect, every negotiation, every decision. And sometimes, she trailed off, surprised by her own honesty. Sometimes I want to be anonymous too, just a person, not a problem, not a curiosity, not a tragedy. Just yourself, just myself. They sat in the quiet kitchen, drinking tea, 2 people temporarily free from the weight of who they were supposed to be. I'll have to leave soon, Darian said eventually. I can't stay hidden forever. I know, but not yet. It wasn't a question, but Alara answered anyway. No, not yet. Thank you. She shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. You're still healing. It wouldn't be right to send you away before you're ready. Is that the only reason? The question hung between them, dangerous and real. Alara stood, picking up her cup. It's late. We should both try to sleep. She didn't answer his question. Couldn't, because the truth was complicated and frightening, and she'd already been honest enough for one night. But as she climbed the stairs to her empty room, she knew he'd heard the answer anyway. In everything she hadn't said, not yet. The words echoed in her mind long after she finally fell asleep. Morning came too early, dragging Alara from restless sleep into cold reality. She dressed mechanically, braided her hair without looking in the mirror, and went downstairs to find Darian already awake, standing at the window overlooking the overgrown gardens. He'd dressed himself, poorly. His shirt hung loose, unbuttoned at the collar, and he held his left arm carefully against his ribs. But he was upright, steady, and that meant time was running out. You shouldn't be standing, she said. I'm fine. You're stubborn. So are you. He didn't turn from the window. Your gardens, they used to be magnificent, didn't they? Alara stiffened. What makes you say that? The structure's still there, the bones of something carefully planned. Whoever designed them knew what they were doing. My husband. The words came out sharper than intended. He loved gardens, spent hours out there choosing plants, arranging beds. It was his passion. And you haven't maintained them. I've been maintaining a household on borrowed time and empty coffers. The gardens weren't exactly a priority. I didn't mean it as criticism. Yes, you did. She crossed the room, standing beside him to look out at the tangles of dead roses and choked pathways. Everything about this place is a criticism to people like you, proof that I'm failing. That's not what I see. Then what do you see? He was quiet for a moment, studying the landscape. Survival. You've kept the house standing, the land productive enough to feed yourself and your staff. You're still here. That's not failure. It's not success either. Success is a luxury of people who've never had to fight for basics. He finally looked at her. You're fighting. That counts for more. Alara wanted to argue, to push back against the unexpected understanding in his voice. Instead, she just nodded, throat tight. The moment broke when Mrs. Hewitt rushed in, face flushed, wringing her hands on her apron. We have visitors, she said, breathless. Coming up the drive. 3 riders, fine horses. Darian went rigid. Did you see their colors? Blue and silver. He swore, quiet, vicious. They found me. Who? Alara demanded. My people. My mother must have sent them. He turned from the window, moving faster than he should with cracked ribs. I need to leave. Now. You can barely walk. I'll manage. No. The word came out hard, certain. Alara moved to block the doorway. You're not running anywhere. You'll collapse before you reach the road. You don't understand. Is it? Then explain it to me. Fast. Darian's jaw worked. Outside, the sound of hooves grew louder, closer. My mother, the Dowager Duchess. She's protective and controlling. If she finds me here like this, she'll... He stopped, frustration and something darker crossing his face. She'll make this your problem. She'll question everything. Why you didn't send word immediately. Why you kept me here. She'll turn help into suspicion. Let her try. You don't know her. I know me. Alara stepped closer, keeping her voice low and firm. I saved your life. I gave you shelter. I did nothing wrong, and I'm not going to act guilty because some duchess has opinions about it. Alara, go upstairs. Second door on the left. It's empty. Stay there and stay quiet. I'm not hiding. You're not facing them either. Not yet. Not until I understand what we're dealing with. She grabbed his arm, felt him flinch. Trust me. Please. The last word cost her, and they both knew it. Darian stared at her, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded. Second door on the left. Go. He went, limping toward the stairs, and Alara turned to Mrs. Hewitt. How do I look? Like someone who's been working too hard for too long. Perfect. Let them think I'm harmless. She opened the door just as the riders pulled up. 2 men in expensive riding coats flanking a woman who sat her horse like she'd been born in the saddle. Older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The Dowager Duchess of Ashbro, undoubtedly. Alara stepped out, squinting against the morning sun. Can I help you? The Duchess dismounted with practiced grace, handing her reins to one of the men. She looked at the house, at Alara, assessing everything in seconds. I'm looking for my son, Darian Vexley, Duke of Ashbro. We have reason to believe he was traveling this road 6 days ago and hasn't been seen since. I'm sorry, Alara said carefully. I haven't seen anyone matching that description. The lie tasted wrong, but she held the Duchess's gaze steady. You're certain? Perhaps you heard of an accident? A carriage crash? Nothing like that. One of the men shifted in his saddle. Your Grace, there are tracks leading here. Recent. Multiple horses. The Duchess's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. Indeed. How many horses do you keep, Mrs. Whitford? Alara Whitford. And I keep 2. 1 for riding, 1 for the cart. Yet my man sees evidence of at least 4. Damn. Alara kept her face neutral. I had visitors 2 days ago. The blacksmith and his assistant. They rode here to discuss repairs. I see. The Duchess moved closer, studying Alara with the same intensity Darian had used. Like mother, like son. You'll forgive me, Mrs. Whitford, but I find it curious that a woman living alone would turn away searchers asking about a missing nobleman. I didn't turn you away. I answered your question honestly. Did you? The challenge hung between them. Alara felt sweat prickling her spine despite the cold. This woman was dangerous. Not physically, but in the way powerful people were dangerous. She could ruin Alara with a word, a rumor, a well-placed insinuation. But Alara had survived creditors, grief, and 3 winters alone. She'd be damned if she crumbled now. I did, she said firmly. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. If I hear anything about your son, I'll send word immediately. To where? Ashborough Estate, I assume. You know who I am. You introduced yourself as the Dowager Duchess. I made an educated guess. For the first time, something like respect flickered across the older woman's face. You're either very brave or very foolish, Mrs. Whitford. I've been called both. Usually on the same day. The Duchess almost smiled. Almost. Then she turned to her men. Search the grounds, carefully. You can't, Alara started. I can and I will. My son is missing. You're the last estate on the road where his carriage was headed. I have every right to ensure he's not here against his will. Against his will? That's absurd. Is it? Or are you holding him for ransom? It's happened before. Rage flooded Alara's chest, hot and immediate. How dare you? How dare I? The Duchess stepped closer, voice dropping to something cold and precise. My son is missing. You're lying about something. I can see it in your eyes. So either you let my men search, or I bring the magistrate here and make this official. Your choice. Alara's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to fight, to throw this woman off her property, to protect what little dignity she had left. But the magistrate would ask questions, real questions, and Darian's presence would come out anyway, along with explanations that would make everything worse. Fine, she bit out. Search. You won't find anything. The men dismounted and started combing the grounds, the stables, the outbuildings, the gardens. The Duchess stayed with Alara, watching her face more than the search. You loved your husband, she said suddenly. Alara blinked, thrown by the shift. What? The gardens? The house? Everything here speaks of someone who cared deeply and lost it all. I recognize the signs. The Duchess's expression softened marginally. I'm not your enemy, Mrs. Whitford, but I will find my son. Then you should look elsewhere. He's not here. Upstairs, behind the second door on the left, Darian better be staying quiet. The search took 20 minutes. The men were thorough, but not destructive, checking rooms, looking behind furniture, examining the stables. One of them found the wrecked carriage horses in the paddock, the 2 Alara had saved, and her stomach dropped. Your Grace, he called. These horses bear the Ashborough crest. The Duchess turned to Alara, and her expression went from cold to glacial. You said you hadn't seen my son. I haven't. Then how did his horses end up in your stable? Alara's mind raced. I found them on the road, wandering. One was injured. I couldn't just leave them. When? 3 days ago. 3 days? The Duchess's voice was deadly calm. And you didn't think to mention this when I asked about accidents? You asked about your son, not horses. Don't parse words with me, girl. Where is he? I told you. Search the house, the Duchess ordered. Every room, now. The men moved toward the door. Alara stepped in front of it, heart hammering. You have no right. I have every right. Those are my son's horses. This is my son's last known location, and you are lying through your teeth. The Duchess's eyes blazed. Move aside or I'll move you. For a wild second, Alara considered fighting, actually physically fighting. But then a voice came from inside the house, calm and commanding. That won't be necessary, Mother. Everyone froze. Darian appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, looking like hell but unmistakably alive. His mother stared at him, face cycling through shock, relief, and fury in rapid succession. Darian. Hello, Mother. You! She crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled him into a careful embrace, mindful of injuries she couldn't yet see but clearly suspected. We thought you were dead. Clearly not. She pulled back, hands gripping his shoulders, eyes scanning every visible injury. "What happened? Where have you been? Why didn't you send word?" "I had an accident. Mrs. Whitford saved my life and provided shelter while I recovered." His voice was steady, almost formal. "She's done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong? She lied to me, to my face." "At my request." The Duchess's gaze snapped to Alara, reassessing. "Explain. Now." "There's nothing to explain." Darian straightened, wincing. "I asked Mrs. Whitford to maintain my privacy while I healed. She honored that request. If you're angry, be angry with me." "Oh, I'm furious with you, but we'll discuss that later." She turned back to Alara, expression unreadable. "You saved his life?" Alara lifted her chin. "I stopped a runaway carriage. He was inside. I brought him here and tended his injuries. That's all." "That's all." The Duchess repeated the words like she was tasting them. "Do you have any idea what position you've put yourself in?" "I put myself in the position of helping someone who needed it." "Noble. Foolish. Perhaps both." The Duchess looked between them, and something calculating entered her expression. "Regardless, you have my gratitude. And my son apparently has found himself indebted to you." "I don't want debt," Alara said flatly. "I want to be left alone." "Too late for that, I'm afraid." The Duchess gestured to her men. "Bring a cart. His Grace will be returning home today." "I'm not ready to travel," Darian said. "You're perfectly capable of lying in a cart for 3 hours. We have physicians at Ashborough. Real ones." "Mrs. Whitford is perfectly capable." "Mrs. Whitford is a widow running a failing estate with no resources and no staff. She's done admirably, but this farce ends now." The Duchess's tone left no room for argument. "You're coming home. Today." Darian's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Couldn't, really. His mother was right. He couldn't hide forever, and staying here was becoming dangerous for Alara in ways neither of them had fully considered. "I need to collect my things," he said. "You have things?" "What's left of my coat? My boots?" He glanced at Alara. "Mrs. Whitford was kind enough to repair what could be salvaged." The Duchess followed his gaze, studying Alara with renewed interest. "Was she?" Something in her tone made Alara's skin prickle. This woman saw too much, understood too quickly. She'd noted the careful way Darian looked at Alara, the protective edge in his voice, and she was drawing conclusions that Alara absolutely did not want drawn. "I'll fetch them," Alara said quickly, escaping inside. Her hand shook as she gathered his belongings from the parlor. This was good. He was leaving. Life would return to normal. Quiet, difficult, lonely, normal. Exactly what she'd wanted. Except she hadn't wanted this knot in her chest, this strange sense of loss. "Stop it," she muttered to herself. "He's a duke. You're a widow with nothing. This was always temporary." She carried his things outside, where the Duchess had pulled Darian aside for a whispered conversation that looked intense. Alara couldn't hear the words, but she caught fragments. Reckless, irresponsible, consequences. One of the men had brought a small cart padded with blankets. Practical, if humiliating. Darian would hate every second of it. When the Duchess finished her lecture, Darian turned to Alara. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes said things he couldn't speak aloud. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "You already thanked me." "Not properly." "Not—" He stopped, glancing at his mother. "I'm in your debt, Mrs. Whitford. That's not something I take lightly." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree." "Then we'll have to disagree." She handed him his coat, their fingers brushing briefly. "Heal properly, use actual physicians, don't do anything stupid. I make no promises." "Of course you don't." They stood there, two people who'd somehow become important to each other in less than a week, now being torn apart by reality. Alara wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture the strange connection they'd built. But with his mother watching, with the men loading the cart, there was nothing to say that wouldn't be misunderstood or weaponized later. So she just nodded. "Safe travels, Your Grace." The formal address created distance, and they both felt it. Darian's expression flickered with something that might have been regret. "Goodbye, Mrs. Whitford." They helped him into the cart. He settled with obvious discomfort, jaw tight against pain. The Duchess mounted her horse, giving final instructions to her men. Then she turned to Alara one last time. I meant what I said. You have my gratitude, and perhaps, in time, we'll speak again. It sounded like a threat and a promise tangled together. Alara just inclined her head. The small convoy pulled away, horses stepping carefully down the rutted drive. Alara stood watching until they disappeared around the bend, until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then she turned and walked back into her too-quiet house. Mrs. Hewitt was waiting in the kitchen. "Well," the older woman said, "that was dramatic. That's one word for it. Are you all right?" Alara poured herself tea with hands that had finally stopped shaking. "I'm fine." "Liar. I'm alive. My home is still mine. He's gone. Everything's back to normal." "Is it?" Alara drank her tea and didn't answer, because they both knew nothing would ever be quite normal again. The days crawled by. Alara threw herself into work, repairing fences, inventorying supplies, planning for spring planting. She rode into the village twice, negotiated with merchants, collected half of what she was owed and promises for the rest. Normal. Routine. Exactly like before. Except she kept expecting to hear his voice from the parlor, kept setting 2 cups out for tea before remembering she was alone, kept catching herself looking toward the drive, watching for riders that never came. "This is ridiculous," she told her reflection on the 4th day. "He was here less than a week. You barely knew him. Stop acting like a lovesick fool." Her reflection didn't argue, but it didn't look convinced either. On the 7th day, a rider came. Not Darian, one of his men, wearing Ashborough colors, carrying a sealed letter. "From His Grace," the man said, handing it over. "I'm to wait for a reply." Alara broke the seal with fingers that wanted to tremble. The handwriting was strong, precise, completely unlike the messy scrawl of most men she knew. "Mrs. Whitford, I have returned to Ashborough and been thoroughly examined by 3 separate physicians, all of whom confirm what you already knew. My ribs are cracked, my head wound is healing cleanly, and I'll be fine in a few weeks. They also confirm that without your immediate intervention, I likely would have died on that road. My mother insists I write to thank you formally. Consider this my formal thanks. But there's something else, something less formal. I've thought about our conversation in your kitchen, about wanting to be anonymous, about being just ourselves, without titles or expectations. I meant what I said then, and I find myself wanting more of those conversations. My estate sits 3 hours north of yours, close enough to visit, far enough to maintain propriety. I would like to call on you if you'll permit it, not as a duke honoring a debt, but as a man who found something unexpected in your parlor, someone who spoke honestly and demanded the same in return. You can refuse. I'll understand, but I hope you won't. D. Vexley." Alara read it twice, 3 times, her heart doing complicated things in her chest that she absolutely did not have time for. The messenger cleared his throat. "His Grace said you might have a reply?" She should say no, should send a polite refusal, and close this door before it opened any wider. She had nothing to offer a duke except complications and scandal. He was powerful, wealthy, important. She was surviving on pride and stubbornness. But then she remembered his face in the candlelight, his voice saying, "I'm not other men," the way he'd looked at her gardens and seen survival instead of failure. "Tell His Grace," she said slowly, "that he's welcome to call, but he comes alone, and he doesn't bring gifts or charity. If he wants honest conversation, he'll get honest conversation, including the parts that might not be flattering." The messenger blinked. "That's your exact message, ma'am?" "Word for word." "He'll be pleased. He'll be challenged. There's a difference." The man actually smiled. "I believe His Grace prefers challenges, ma'am." Then he's about to get what he asked for. The messenger left, and Alara stood in her empty hallway, holding a letter she probably shouldn't have kept, feeling something she definitely shouldn't feel. "You're making a mistake," she told herself. Probably. But it was her mistake to make, and she was so tired of playing it safe. 3 days later, a single rider appeared on the drive. Darian sat his horse carefully, favoring his ribs, but he rode alone just as she'd demanded. No servants, no guards, just a man coming to visit. Alara watched from the window, heart hammering stupidly. She'd changed her dress 3 times that morning before forcing herself to stop. This wasn't a courtship, it was just a visit, a conversation, nothing more. She opened the door before he could knock. You're early. I'm punctual. He dismounted with only a slight wince. You look well. You look like you're still healing. Honest as ever. I appreciate it. They stood awkwardly in the doorway, neither quite sure how to navigate this new dynamic. Finally, Ilara stepped aside. Would you like tea? I'd like whatever you're willing to offer. Careful, that's a dangerous answer. I'm aware. Something sparked between them. Sharp, electric, dangerous. Ilara felt it settle low in her stomach, unfamiliar and terrifying. She led him to the parlor, where Mrs. Hewitt had already prepared tea and disappeared with remarkable discretion. They sat across from each other, the settee where he'd first woken between them like a shared memory. Your mother must have had opinions, Ilara said, pouring. My mother has opinions about everything. It's her defining characteristic. About me specifically. Especially about you. He accepted the cup. She thinks you're either brilliantly manipulative or dangerously naive. Which do you think? Neither. I think you're someone who does what needs doing and doesn't apologize for it. He paused. She also thinks I'm making a mistake coming here. Are you? Probably. Then why do it? Darian set down his cup, leaning forward carefully. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. About our conversations. About the way you looked at me when I was just a man bleeding in your parlor. Not a duke. Not a title. Just someone who needed help. Darian, I know this is complicated. I know I'm bringing problems to your door just by being here. But I can't. He stopped, jaw working. I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is. Not yet. Ilara's throat tightened. What do you think this is? I don't know, but I want to find out. If you'll let me. She should say no, should protect herself, her home, her hard-won independence. But when she looked at him, really looked, she saw the same thing she felt reflected back. Want, fear, hope. One visit a week, she said finally. You come alone. You don't bring money or try to fix my problems. We just talk, like people, equals. Equals. Yes, that's the condition. I accept. Just like that? Just like that. He smiled, and it transformed his face completely. Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible conversationalist. I tend to lecture about agricultural reform and drainage systems. I know things about drainage systems that would bore you to tears. Try me. So she did. And he listened, actually listened, asking questions that proved he understood what she was explaining. They talked about soil composition and crop rotation, about managing estates with limited staff, about the impossible balance of maintaining dignity while bleeding money. Hours passed. The tea went cold. The sun shifted across the floor. And for the first time in 3 years, Ilara felt like herself. Not a widow, not a problem, not a woman struggling to survive. Just herself, talking to someone who saw her clearly and chose to stay anyway. When he finally left, as the sun touched the horizon, he paused at the door. Next week? He asked. Next week. I'm looking forward to it. So am I. He rode away, and Ilara closed the door, leaning against it, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. Mrs. Hewitt appeared from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. Well? Well, what? Are you going to pretend that didn't mean something? Ilara pushed off the door, heading toward the stairs. I'm going to pretend I have work to do and visitors to prepare for next week. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. But as she climbed to her room, she was smiling, and for once, she didn't try to stop it. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Dangerous, intoxicating, impossible to sustain. Darian came every Thursday, always alone, always precisely at 2. They talked about everything except what was actually happening between them. Safer that way, less real. But by the 5th week, Ilara could feel the carefully maintained distance starting to crack. She was in the garden when he arrived that Thursday, trying to salvage what she could of the rose beds before winter finished killing them. The thorns had shredded her gloves, dirt caked her nails, and she'd stopped caring about looking presentable hours ago. You're late, she called without looking up. It's 2:05. Like I said, late. She heard his footsteps on the gravel path, felt him stop beside her. You're bleeding. Ilara glanced at her hand. A thorn had caught her palm, drawing a thin line of red. It happens. Let me see. It's fine. Elara. The way he said her name, like a command and a question tangled together, made her look up. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the concern etched in his face, the way his jaw tightened when she was being stubborn. She held out her hand. Darian examined the cut, thumb brushing her wrist in a way that had nothing to do with the injury. You should clean this properly. I will, later. Now would be better. Are you always this bossy with people who save your life? Only the ones who refuse to take care of themselves. But he was smiling, that rare expression that transformed him from imposing Duke to just Darian, the man who'd sat in her kitchen and admitted he wanted to be normal. They went inside. Mrs. Hewitt had left tea in the parlor and conspicuously absented herself again. Darian washed Elara's hand himself, careful and thorough, wrapping it in clean linen despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. There, he said, not letting go. Better. Elara's heart hammered stupidly. His hands were warm, steady, still holding hers like he'd forgotten to let go. Or chosen not to. Darian. You're still holding my hand. I know. Why? He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in the air between them. Because I want to. Because I've wanted to for weeks. Because pretending this is just friendly conversation is getting harder every time I come here. Elara's breath caught. We agreed. I know what we agreed, but I'm done pretending. He moved closer, still holding her hand, his other hand coming up to cup her face. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I'm alone in this and I'll leave right now. I'll never come back. She should lie, should protect herself, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she whispered, You're not alone. Darian closed his eyes briefly, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. When he opened them again, the careful control he'd maintained shattered completely. I want you, he said, voice rough. Not gratitude, not obligation, just you. The woman who faced down a runaway carriage and my mother with the same fearlessness. The woman who speaks her mind and doesn't care about my title. I want... Elara kissed him, cut off his words with her mouth on his, decisive and terrified and done with thinking. He made a surprise sound against her lips, then pulled her closer, deepening the kiss with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle, wasn't practiced or perfect, just desperate and real, and 3 years of loneliness crashing against 6 weeks of denial. His hand fisted in her hair, her fingers clutched his shirt, and neither of them cared about propriety or consequences or anything except this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elara pressed her forehead against his. This is a terrible idea, she said. The worst. You're a duke. I'm a widow with nothing. You have everything I want. Your mother will hate this. My mother hates everything I do. This will just be one more item on a very long list. Despite herself, Elara laughed, shaky and breathless. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, it's complicated as hell, but I don't care. He pulled back enough to look at her properly. Do you? She wanted to say yes, wanted to be practical, sensible, safe. But when she looked at him, at this man who'd seen her at her worst and come back anyway, who'd listened to her talk about drainage systems like it was poetry, who'd just kissed her like she was precious instead of broken, she couldn't lie. No, she said, I don't care either, and that terrifies me. Good. I'd hate to be terrified alone. They stood there in her shabby parlor, holding each other, both knowing they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The smart thing would be to step back, pretend it hadn't happened, return to their careful Thursday visits. But then Darian's hand traced her jaw, his thumb brushing her lower lip, and smart was the last thing on Elara's mind. Stay, she said. Not a question, a decision. Elara, I know what I'm asking. Stay anyway. Something dark and wanting flared in his eyes. Your reputation is already compromised by having you visit weekly. Staying a few hours longer won't make it worse. She stepped back just enough to think clearly. I'm not asking for promises or declarations, just this, whatever this is, for however long it lasts. That's not enough. It's all I can offer. Darian studied her face, seeing too much as always. You're protecting yourself. Someone has to. Not from me, especially from you. She moved to the window, putting distance between them. You're dangerous, Darian. Not because you'd hurt me deliberately, but because I could get used to this. To you, and when it ends, why does it have to end? Because you're a duke and I'm… Stop. He crossed to her, turning her to face him. Stop telling me what I should want based on who you think I'm supposed to be. I don't care about estates or money or social expectations. I care about you, the real you. Not some polished version, not a duchess who'd fit neatly into my world. Just Alara, exactly as you are. You say that now, I'll say it tomorrow, and the day after, and every day you'll listen. His voice was fierce, certain in a way that made her chest ache. I know my own mind, and I know what I want. The question is whether you can accept that. Alara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Thomas was easy. We were friends who became more. I don't even know what this is. Neither do I, but I want to find out. He took her hand again, gentler this time. Stay scared, but stay with me anyway. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. No promises of perfection, no guarantees, just the raw truth that he was as uncertain as she was, but willing to try anyway. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring instead of consuming, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. You should know, he said. My mother is hosting a dinner party in 2 weeks. She's expecting me to attend. That sounds painful. It will be. Unless you come with me. Alara's stomach dropped. Darian, I can't. Why not? Because I don't belong in that world. I don't have the right clothes, the right manners, the right anything. You have yourself. That's more than enough. For you, maybe, but your mother will have to accept it. His expression hardened. I'm done hiding what I want to make other people comfortable. I want you there, with me, as my guest. Your mother will make assumptions. Let her. Your friends will gossip. They already gossip about everything I do. At least this time it'll be worth gossiping about. Alara wanted to argue, to list all the ways this was a catastrophically bad idea. But the way he looked at her, like she was worth fighting for, worth defending, worth claiming publicly, made her defenses crumble. 2 weeks? She said. 2 weeks. I'll need a dress. I'll send… No. She cut him off firmly. No gifts. I'll figure it out myself. Alara, those were the rules. No charity. I meant it. He sighed but nodded. You're impossible. You like that about me. I do, unfortunately. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, talking and not talking, learning the shape of this new thing between them. When Darian finally left, after dark, Mrs. Hewitt was waiting with raised eyebrows and knowing looks. Don't, Alara warned. I didn't say anything. You were thinking it. I'm always thinking. That's not a crime. The older woman studied her. You look happy, scared but happy. I feel terrified. That's how you know it matters. Alara wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted and too confused and too aware that Mrs. Hewitt was right. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of panic and preparation. Alara rode to the village and traded 3 of Thomas's old books for fabric, not fine silk, but good quality wool in deep blue. Mrs. Hewitt had been a seamstress once, and together they worked late into the nights, cutting and stitching and cursing when the seams didn't line up right. It doesn't have to be perfect, Mrs. Hewitt said, as Alara ripped out a section for the 3rd time. It has to be good enough that I don't embarrass him. You couldn't embarrass him if you tried. His mother will find a way to make me feel like I did. The older woman's expression softened. Then you'll hold your head high and remind yourself that he chose you, not her version of acceptable, you. The words helped. A little. Darian came Thursday as always, found her surrounded by fabric scraps and frustration, and laughed until she threw a pincushion at him. It's not funny, she said. It's a little funny. I'm trying to make myself presentable for your world, and you're mocking me. He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. You're already presentable. More than presentable. You're stunning and strong and completely yourself. The dress is just fabric. You're what matters. Sweet words from a man who's never had to worry about what people think of his clothes. Fair point. He kissed her forehead. But I still mean it. The night of the dinner party arrived too quickly. Alara dressed carefully, fingers trembling as she fastened the buttons. The blue wool fit well enough, not perfect, but respectable. She'd done her hair 3 times before settling on a simple twist. No jewelry. She didn't own any worth wearing. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman trying very hard to be something she wasn't. Stop it, she told her reflection. You're going as yourself. That has to be enough. Darian sent a carriage, despite her protests. When she climbed in, she found him waiting, dressed in formal black that made him look every inch the duke he was. You look beautiful, he said. You're required to say that. I'm required to say nothing. I'm choosing to tell you the truth. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. Thank you for doing this. I haven't done anything yet except agree to walk into a room full of people who'll judge me. They'll try. You'll survive. Your confidence is touching. I've seen you face worse than dinner party gossip. He had a point. Ashborough Estate made Alara's home look like a cottage. The main house stretched across perfectly manicured grounds, lit by hundreds of lanterns. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging elegantly dressed guests who moved with the easy confidence of people who'd never questioned their place in the world. Alara's stomach twisted. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. Darian, look at me. He turned her to face him, expression serious. I'm asking you to walk into a room full of people who'll judge you unfairly. I know that. But I'll be beside you every second, and if anyone makes you uncomfortable, we leave immediately. I promise. Your mother is one person, and she doesn't control me no matter how much she thinks she should. He squeezed her hand. Trust me? Alara took a shaky breath. I'm trying. That's all I ask. They entered together, and every head turned. Alara felt the weight of dozens of stares, heard the sudden hush of speculation. Darian's hand tightened on hers, steady, grounding, present. The Dowager Duchess stood near the fireplace, holding court among a cluster of older women. Her eyes locked on Alara, expression unreadable. Here we go, Darian murmured. They crossed the room. The Duchess watched them approach like a general surveying a battlefield. Mother, Darian said, you remember Mrs. Whitford? I do. The Duchess's gaze swept over Alara, cataloging every detail of her homemade dress, her simple hair, her obvious discomfort. How unexpected to see you here. Your son was kind enough to invite me, Alara said, keeping her voice steady. Kind? Yes. My son has always been excessively kind. The Duchess's tone made kindness sound like a weakness. Tell me, Mrs. Whitford, how is your estate? Still managing alone? The question was barbed, designed to expose Alara's vulnerabilities in front of an audience. I manage as well as anyone in my position, Alara said carefully, which is to say, poorly. Mother, Darian's voice hardened, that's enough. Is it? I'm simply making conversation. You're being deliberately cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. The Duchess turned back to Alara, something calculating in her eyes. You do understand, don't you, that my son's interest is temporary? He's had these enthusiasms before. They always fade. The words landed like physical blows. Alara felt her face flush, humiliation washing through her. Mother, I'm warning you. It's fine, Alara interrupted. She met the Duchess's gaze directly. You're right. I'm not suitable. My estate is failing, my prospects are non-existent, and I have nothing to offer except myself, which is clearly insufficient for your standards. Finally, some honesty. But here's some more honesty. Alara's voice didn't waver. I didn't ask for your son's attention. I saved his life because it was the right thing to do. And whatever happens between us, whether it lasts a week or a lifetime, isn't your concern, because he chose this, and so did I. Silence fell across the room. Every guest within earshot had stopped pretending not to listen. The Duchess's expression went glacial. How dare you speak to me that way? The same way you spoke to me, with truth, however uncomfortable. Alara turned to Darian. I'd like to leave now. Gladly. They walked out together, past the staring guests, through the ornate doors, into the cold night air. Alara was shaking, adrenaline and rage, and something that felt dangerously close to tears. I'm sorry, Darian said as soon as they were outside. I should never have brought you here. You thought your mother would behave, I know. Alara pulled her hand free, wrapping her arms around herself. She was right, though. About everything. She was wrong about everything. Was she? I don't belong in your world, Darian. Tonight proved that. Tonight proved my mother is cruel when she feels threatened. Nothing more. Threatened? Alara laughed, bitter, exhausted. By me? That's absurd. Is it? You're everything she's not. Independent, honest, unbothered by rules that don't make sense. He moved closer, voice urgent. She sees that, sees what I see, and it terrifies her because it means I might actually choose something she doesn't control. I can't fight her. I don't have the weapons. You don't need weapons. You just need to keep being yourself. That's not enough. It's everything. Darian grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. I don't want a woman who fits perfectly into this world. I want someone who challenges it, challenges me, makes me think about what actually matters instead of just maintaining appearances. Pretty words, but words don't change reality. Then let me change reality. He was breathing hard, emotion cracking through his usual control. Marry me. Alara froze. What? Marry me. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. Soon. Before my mother can sabotage this further. Before you can talk yourself out of taking a risk. Darian, you're not thinking clearly. I've never been clearer. I love you, Alara. Not gratitude, not fascination. Love. The kind that's messy and complicated and absolutely certain. His hands tightened on her shoulders. Say yes. Everything in Alara screamed to say no, to protect herself, to run before this impossibility destroyed her. But when she looked at him, really looked, she saw the truth laid bare. He meant it, every word. He was offering her everything, risking everything, and all she had to do was be brave enough to take it. I need time, she whispered. How much time? I don't know, more than 5 seconds. Fair enough. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. But know this, I'm not changing my mind. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. So take your time. Think. But don't talk yourself out of something real because it's frightening. Behind them, the door to the estate opened. The Dowager Duchess stood framed in golden light, expression cold as winter stone. Get back inside, Darian. Now. No. This is not a request. I don't care. He didn't move, didn't let go of Alara. I'm leaving, with Mrs. Whitford, and you're going to accept it. If you walk away now, you'll regret it. The only thing I'd regret is staying. Mother and son stared at each other, a battle of wills years in the making. Finally, the Duchess spoke, voice like cut glass. Choose her, and you choose poverty, scandal, ruin. I'll make certain of it. Then I choose ruin. Darian's voice was steady, final. Because I choose her. The Duchess's face went white with rage. You're a fool! Probably, but I'm my own fool. Finally. He turned his back on her, on the estate, the party, everything he'd been raised to value, and led Alara to the carriage. They rode in silence, the weight of what just happened pressing down on both of them. When they reached Alara's estate, Darian walked her to the door. I meant it, he said. Every word. I know. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. Good. He kissed her, gentle and desperate at once. Think about it. That's all I ask. He left, and Alara stood in her doorway, watching his carriage disappear into the darkness, her whole world tilted on its axis. Mrs. Hewitt appeared from the shadows. I heard shouting. He proposed. The older woman's eyebrows shot up. And you said? I said I needed time. Do you? Alara pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed and confused and more frightened than she'd been facing that runaway carriage. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to do it. His mother threatened to ruin him if he chooses me, and he chose you anyway. That tell you something?" It did. It told her everything. But knowing and accepting were two different things, and Alara had survived too much to trust anything that felt this big, this overwhelming, this impossibly right. She went to bed that night with Darian's proposal echoing in her head, his mother's threats weighing on her conscience, and her own heart beating a rhythm that sounded dangerously like yes. Morning came with frost painting the windows and clarity Alara hadn't expected. She woke knowing exactly what terrified her most. Not saying yes to Darian, but saying yes for the wrong reasons. Desperation. Loneliness. The seductive promise of security. She couldn't marry him to escape her problems. She could only marry him if she was willing to create entirely new ones. The thought should have been discouraging. Instead, it felt oddly freeing. Mrs. Hewitt found her in the kitchen, staring at cold tea. "You didn't sleep." "I slept enough." Alara rubbed her eyes. "I need to go into the village, today." "Why?" "Because I need to understand what I'm choosing, all of it, not just the romantic parts." The older woman studied her face. "You're going to say yes, aren't you?" "I don't know yet. But if I do, I need to do it with my eyes open." She rode to the village before noon, heading straight to the blacksmith's shop. Martin Green looked up from his forge, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Mrs. Whitford wasn't expecting you." "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer, not a polite one." He set down his hammer. "All right. If I married the Duke of Ashborough, would you still do business with me?" Martin blinked. "That's a hell of a question." "It's an honest one." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Depends. Would you still be running your estate yourself?" "Yes." "Same terms as now? No special favors because you've got a title?" "Exactly the same." "Then yes, I do business with you. Same as always." He paused, "though I'd probably get paid on time for once." Despite herself, Alara smiled. "Don't count on it. I plan to keep managing my own finances." "Of course you do." He shook his head, amused. "You're actually considering this, aren't you?" "I'm trying to figure out if it's possible. If I can be his wife without losing everything I've fought to become." "That's between you and him. But if you're asking whether this village will turn on you for marrying up..." Martin shrugged. "Some might. Jealousy does strange things to people. But most of us know you, Mrs. Whitford, know what you've survived. A title won't change that." "Even if his mother tries to destroy me?" "Especially then. Nothing makes people more loyal than watching someone powerful try to crush someone they respect." He picked up his hammer again. "Besides, you faced down a runaway carriage. I reckon you can handle one angry duchess." Alara left the forge feeling steadier. She visited the seamstress, the grain merchant, the woman who sold eggs at the market, asked the same question, received similar answers. Some were wary, some were encouraging. None told her it would be easy, but none told her it was impossible either. She was heading home when a familiar carriage appeared, Ashborough colors, driven by the same messenger who'd delivered Darian's letter weeks ago. "Mrs. Whitford." He pulled up beside her. "His Grace asked me to deliver this, said it was urgent." He handed her a sealed envelope, heavier than a simple letter. Alara broke the seal and found two things inside: a brief note in Darian's handwriting and a legal document. The note read, "I meant what I said, all of it. But I also understand your concerns about losing your independence. So I had my solicitor draw this up. Read it, consider it, and know that whatever you choose, I'm not changing my mind about wanting you." The document was a marriage contract, but unlike any Alara had ever seen. It outlined her rights, her autonomy, her control over her own estate, specified that Whitford Manor would remain hers, managed independently, with no interference from Darian or his family. Guaranteed her income, her decisions, her freedom to continue living as she chose. It was a legal promise that marriage wouldn't erase her. Alara read it twice, hands shaking. This wasn't a romantic gesture. It was something far more valuable. Recognition. Respect. A man powerful enough to demand anything, offering to protect the one thing she valued most, herself. "Mrs. Whitford?" The messenger looked concerned. "Are you all right?" "Tell His Grace, She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Tell him I need to see him, today, at my estate. I don't care what he's currently doing. Tell him it's important." The messenger nodded and rode off. Alara continued home, the contract clutched in her hand, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Darian arrived 3 hours later, riding hard, slightly disheveled, clearly worried. "What's wrong?" he said, dismounting before his horse fully stopped. "The messenger said it was urgent." Alara held up the contract. "This." "You don't like it. I can have it changed." "I love it." He stopped. "What?" "I love it. It's the most romantic thing anyone's ever given me." "It's a legal document." "Exactly." She moved closer, still holding the papers. "You understand what I need, what I'm afraid of losing, and you're offering to protect it." "Of course I am. I don't want to own you, Alara. I want to be with you. There's a difference." "Most men don't see it that way." "I'm not most men. You keep forgetting that." "No, I keep being surprised by it." She took a breath, the decision crystallizing. "Ask me again." "Ask you what?" "You know what?" Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Alara, ask me." Darian stepped closer, taking her hands, the contract crushed between their palms. "Marry me, not because it's practical or safe or what anyone expects. Marry me because you want this mess, this complication, this impossible combination of your world and mine. Marry me because you love me, even if you're too scared to say it yet." "I'm terrified," she whispered. "I know." "Your mother will make good on her threats. Let her try. People will say I'm using you. People will say a lot of things, most of them wrong. I have nothing to offer you except problems. You have yourself. That's everything." His voice was steady, certain. "So stop listing reasons why this won't work and tell me yes." Alara looked at him, really looked, saw the man who'd trusted her with his life, who'd listened to her talk about drainage systems, who'd walked away from his mother's approval because it was the right thing to do, who was offering her freedom instead of control, partnership instead of possession, who loved her, completely, terrifyingly. "Really?" "Yes," she said. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want this mess. Yes, I'm absolutely terrified and doing it anyway." Darian's face transformed. He pulled her close, lifting her off her feet, laughing against her hair. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's all I need." He set her down, cupping her face. "I love you. I should have said it before. I love you, Alara Whitford. Your stubbornness and your strength and the way you make me question everything I thought I knew about what matters. I love you too." The words felt strange, unfamiliar. She hadn't said them since Thomas, but they were true. "Even though you're complicated and impossible and going to turn my life upside down. Already have, actually." "Fair point." He kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both smiling like idiots, reality started creeping back in. "Your mother is going to lose her mind," Alara said. "Probably, but that's my problem, not yours. It's our problem now. That's how this works. Then we'll handle it together." He threaded his fingers through hers. "When do you want to do this? I can arrange something small, private." "No." "No? If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Public. Proper. I won't have people saying we snuck around because we were ashamed." Alara's jaw set. "Your mother wants to ruin me? Let her try while I'm standing in a church making vows, refusing to hide." "That's," Darian laughed, shaking his head. "That's either incredibly brave or suicidal." "Probably both. But I'm done being careful. Careful got me 3 years alone, barely surviving, afraid to want anything." She met his eyes. "I want this. I want you. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I wouldn't let you if you tried." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning, or trying to. Mostly, they kept getting distracted, talking and laughing and stealing kisses like they had all the time in the world instead of a battle ahead. When Darian finally left, as the sun set, Alara stood in her doorway feeling like someone had lit a fire under her ribs. Terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely real. Mrs. Hewitt appeared with knowing eyes. "You said yes." "I said yes. About time." "You could have told me that weeks ago." "You wouldn't have listened," the older woman smiled. "When's the wedding?" 3 weeks, maybe less. We haven't decided." "That's fast." "If we wait, I'll talk myself out of it. Or his mother will make it impossible. Better to move quickly. Better to be certain." "I am certain. That's what terrifies me." Mrs. Hewitt pulled her into a rare embrace. "Your husband would have liked him. Thomas. He would have approved." The words hit harder than expected. Alara's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. Thomas wanted you to be happy, to live, not just survive. This is living. This is insanity." Sometimes they're the same thing. The next morning brought the first assault. A letter arrived from the Dowager Duchess, not addressed to Darian, but to Alara directly. "Mrs. Whitford, I understand congratulations are in order. My son has made his choice, however ill-advised. Since reason has failed, I'll be direct. You are not welcome in this family. You will never be accepted by our peers. Your marriage will be a scandal that follows you both until one of you has the sense to end it. However, I am not without mercy. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. A generous one. Enough to save your failing estate, pay your debts, and live comfortably for the rest of your life. All you need to do is walk away, quietly, permanently. Consider it carefully. My son's infatuation will fade. But the damage you're causing to his reputation, his standing, his future, that will be permanent. Do you really want to be responsible for destroying him? The offer stands for 1 week. After that, you'll have made your choice, and I'll have made mine. Sincerely, Dowager Duchess of Ashborough." Alara read it 3 times, fury building with each pass. The woman was offering to buy her off, like she was a problem that could be solved with money. She was still holding the letter when Darian arrived, early, unannounced, looking worried. "She wrote to you, didn't she?" "How did you know?" "Because she wrote to me too, told me she was handling the situation." He saw the letter in her hand. "What did she offer you?" "Money. A lot of it, apparently. And? And I'm going to burn this letter in the fireplace and pretend it never existed." Something fierce and proud flashed in Darian's eyes. "You're not even tempted? By money to walk away from you? No." Alara moved to the fireplace, tossing the letter into the flames. They both watched it burn. "I've been poor, I've survived it. What I can't survive is being bought like I'm merchandise. She won't stop. I know, she'll escalate, spread rumors, try to turn people against us." "Yes. Then we need to move faster than she can." Alara turned to face him. "I want to get married, this week." "This week?" "Alara, that's strategic. If we're already married, she can't prevent it, can't negotiate, can't offer me settlements or threaten you with consequences. It's done. The bans can be waived for a fee. You're a duke. Use that privilege for something useful." Darian stared at her, then started laughing. "You're actually serious." "Completely. We get married quickly, quietly, just us and witnesses. Then we announce it publicly, present it as a fait accompli." She crossed her arms. "Your mother wants a battle? Let's win it before she realizes we've already fought." "That's—" He shook his head, admiration clear. "That's brilliant and slightly terrifying. I learned from watching you. I never taught you ruthless strategy." "No, but you showed me what it looks like to choose what you want despite opposition. I'm just applying the lesson." He pulled her close, kissing her hard. 2 days. I'll arrange everything. Can you be ready?" "I've been ready since I pulled you from that carriage. I just didn't know it yet." "Then let's do this." They worked fast. Darian handled the legal requirements, bribing officials, securing licenses, finding a sympathetic vicar willing to perform the ceremony without questions. Alara packed her essential belongings, arranged for Mrs. Hewitt to maintain the estate, and wrote letters to the village merchants explaining her decision. No elaborate preparations, no guests, no celebration. Just 2 people determined to claim what they wanted before anyone could stop them. The wedding took place in a small church 3 miles from Alara's estate. Dawn light filtered through stained glass, painting the empty pews in colors. The vicar looked nervous, but honored his commitment. Mrs. Hewitt attended as witness, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Alara wore the blue dress she'd made for the dinner party, the same one the Dowager Duchess had judged insufficient. It felt appropriate somehow, a reminder that she was marrying Darian exactly as she was, with no pretense or polish. Darian wore simple black, no ceremonial regalia or ducal trappings, just a man making vows. The ceremony was brief, almost stark in its simplicity. No flowers, no music, just words that bound them legally, officially, irrevocably. I, Darian Alexander Vexley, take you, Alara Margaret Whitford. His voice was steady, certain. His hands held hers without trembling. I, Alara Margaret Whitford, take you, Darian Alexander Vexley. Her voice barely wavered. She meant every word. When the vicar pronounced them married, Darian kissed her like they were alone in the universe. No audience, no expectations, just them. Well, Alara said when they broke apart, that's done. Having regrets already? Ask me again when your mother finds out. That's fair. They signed the register, made it official, and walked out into cold morning air as husband and wife. The simplicity of it felt right. No spectacle, no performance, just a choice made and honored. What now? Alara asked. Now we tell the world. Darian helped her into the carriage. And prepare for the consequences. The announcement went out that afternoon. Notices to newspapers, letters to family, messages to anyone who mattered. By evening, all of London would know. The Duke of Ashborough had married a widow of no consequence in a dawn ceremony with no guests and no warning. The scandal would be magnificent. The Dowager Duchess's response arrived by express courier before sunset. Not a letter this time, a summons, demanding Darian appear at Ashborough Estate immediately to explain himself. She's furious, he said, reading it. Obviously. She wants me to come alone. Absolutely not. Alara took the summons from his hand. We go together, as husband and wife. If she wants to rage, she can rage at both of us. Alara, no, we're not separating now. That's exactly what she wants. To divide us, make me feel unwelcome, convince you that you made a mistake. She held his gaze. We face her together, or not at all? She'll be vicious. I've survived worse. Not like her, you haven't. Then I'll learn. Alara squeezed his hand. I chose this, Darian, the complications. The battles, all of it. I'm not backing down at the first obstacle. Pride and concern warred on his face. Finally, he nodded. Together, then. Together. They rode to Ashborough Estate as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Alara's stomach twisted with nerves, but she kept her spine straight and her expression calm. This was a test, the first of many. She intended to pass. The Dowager Duchess waited in the drawing room, standing by the fireplace like a general preparing for war. When they entered, her gaze could have cut glass. So, she said coldly, you actually did it. We did. Darian's voice was steady. Mother, allow me to formally introduce my wife, Duchess of Ashborough. The title hung in the air. Alara wore it uncertainly, still getting used to the weight. Duchess? The older woman's lip curled. You think a ceremony makes you worthy of that title? I think a ceremony makes it legal, Alara said evenly. Worthy is something I'll have to prove. I'm prepared to try. How noble, how naive. The Duchess moved closer, circling like a predator. Do you have any idea what you've done? The position you've put him in? I married the man I love. That's all. That's all? Her voice rose. You've made him a laughingstock. His peers will mock him for marrying so far beneath his station. His allies will question his judgment. His enemies will use this against him for years. Let them, Darian stepped forward. I made my choice with full knowledge of the consequences. Alara is my wife. That's not changing. Then you're both fools. Probably, but we're married fools. You'll have to accept it. I'll do no such thing. The Duchess turned her fury on Alara. You may have trapped him with this hasty marriage, but don't think for a moment that means you're welcome in this family. You'll never be accepted, never be respected. You'll spend the rest of your life being pitied or scorned. Maybe, Alara met her glare without flinching. Or maybe I'll change their minds. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. We'll see how long that confidence lasts when society turns its back on you. Society already turned its back on me 3 years ago. I survived it then. I'll survive it now. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the Duchess's face. She'd expected tears, apologies, maybe begging. Not this calm, immovable certainty. You're serious, she said finally. Completely. Even knowing I'll make your life difficult? Especially knowing that. Alara took Darian's hand, threading their fingers together. You can threaten us. Spread rumors. Try to turn his friends against him. But you can't undo this marriage. It's legal. Binding. Done. So you have two choices. Accept it and find a way to live with it, or spend years fighting a battle you've already lost. The room went silent. The Duchess stared at them. These two people who'd somehow outmaneuvered her, who'd chosen each other despite everything she'd done to prevent it. You'll regret this, she said finally, voice tight. Possibly, Darian said, but it'll be our regret, not yours. Get out, both of you. They left, walking through the grand halls together, ignoring the stares of servants who'd already heard the news. When they reached the carriage, Alara finally let herself breathe. That was awful, Darian finished, but you were incredible. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's the trick, isn't it? Looking confident even when you're not. She leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. Is it always going to be like this? For a while, probably, until she realizes we're not breaking. And if we do break, we won't. He kissed her forehead. We're too stubborn, both of us. Over the next week, the scandal exploded exactly as predicted. Newspapers ran stories, society ladies whispered. Invitations that should have arrived for the new Duchess of Ashborough mysteriously didn't materialize. But something else happened too. Something unexpected. Letters started arriving at Alara's estate. Not from society, but from women. Widows who'd lost everything. Wives struggling to maintain independence in marriages that consumed them. Daughters watching their mothers disappear into their fathers' shadows. They wrote about courage, about choosing yourself, about refusing to be erased. You give us hope, one letter said, that we can be ourselves and still be loved. Thank you for not apologizing, wrote another, for showing us it's possible. Alara read them in her library, overwhelmed. She'd expected scorn, judgment, rejection. Instead, she'd accidentally become something she'd never intended. A symbol. Proof that a woman could survive loss, build a life alone, and still choose vulnerability without surrendering herself. Look at this, she said, showing Darian the stack of letters. He read through several, expression shifting from surprise to something like wonder. You're changing minds. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just living. That's exactly why it matters. He pulled her close. You're not performing for anyone, not pretending to be something you're not. You're just yourself, and people see that. Your mother won't care about letters from women with no social power. Maybe not. But those women have daughters, sisters, friends, and they're all watching, talking, forming opinions. He smiled. You're building your own kind of power, the kind that can't be bought or inherited. 3 weeks after the wedding, an invitation arrived that stopped them both cold. Lady Catherine Pemberton, one of society's most influential hostesses, was hosting a dinner, and she'd invited them both, specifically requesting the new Duchess of Ashborough's presence. This is a trap, Alara said immediately. Probably. She's friends with your mother. She'll use this to humiliate me publicly. Possibly. So we decline. Or, Darian studied the invitation thoughtfully. We accept, and show them you can't be intimidated. That's insane. You've done insane before. You married me, remember? Despite her fear, Alara laughed. Fair point. They accepted. And on the night of the dinner, Alara dressed in her finest, which still wasn't fine compared to what the other guests would wear, but she'd stopped apologizing for that. She was who she was. Let them judge. Lady Catherine's home was stunning, filled with the elite of London society. Every head turned when they arrived. Whispers followed them through the rooms like shadows. But then Lady Catherine herself approached, older woman, sharp-eyed, powerful in ways that had nothing to do with her husband's title. "Duchess," she said, studying Alara closely, "how lovely to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine, Lady Catherine." "Is it? Even knowing everyone here is dissecting your every word and gesture?" Alara met her gaze steadily. "I've been dissected by creditors, merchants, and the Dowager Duchess herself. I think I can handle dinner conversation." Lady Catherine's lips twitched. "I see why he married you. You've got spine." "I've had to develop one. The best kind, earned, not inherited." She glanced at Darian. "Your mother is furious, you know." "I know," he said mildly. "Good. She's been too comfortable for too long. A little fury might do her good." Lady Catherine turned back to Alara. "Walk with me. Let's see how you handle the wolves." It wasn't a request. Alara glanced at Darian, who nodded encouragingly, and followed Lady Catherine into the crowd. The next hour was brutal. Questions disguised as compliments, compliments disguised as insults, every conversation a tiny test. But Alara had spent 3 years negotiating with people who held power over her survival. The society games were just another form of negotiation. She answered honestly, didn't apologize, didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. And slowly, surprisingly, the room shifted. Not everyone warmed to her. Many remained coldly polite, clearly waiting for her to fail. But a few women started asking genuine questions about her estate, her management strategies, how she'd survived alone. By the time dinner was served, Alara had collected a small group of curious allies, women who saw in her something different from the usual society performance. Lady Catherine watched it all with evident satisfaction. "You'll do," she said to Alara as the evening ended. "Not everyone will accept you, but enough will. That's all you need." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing this out of kindness. I'm doing it because I'm bored of the same conversations with the same people saying the same things. You're interesting. That's rare. I'll try to stay interesting." "You don't have to try, just keep being honest. It's more disruptive than you realize." Darian found her afterward, pulling her aside. "You survived." "I did more than survive. I think I actually made progress." "I saw. Lady Catherine doesn't champion people lightly. If she's claimed you, half of society will follow just to stay in her good graces. And the other half? Will be furious, including my mother." "Good." Alara smiled, tired but genuine. "Let her be furious. I'm done being afraid of her." They rode home in the darkness, and for the first time since the wedding, Alara felt something close to hope. Not that everything would be easy, it wouldn't, but that maybe, possibly, they could actually build something real together, something that honored both who they were separately and who they were becoming together. When they reached Whitford Manor, now officially hers again under their marriage contract, Alara paused before going inside. "Thank you," she said to Darian. "For what?" "For not trying to change me. For protecting my independence even when it would have been easier to just absorb me into your world." "I don't want you absorbed. I want you exactly as you are." He kissed her softly. "Partner, equal, wife. All three?" "All three." They went inside together, and Alara felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, not perfect happiness, but something real and solid and hers. She'd chosen the unknown, and the unknown was choosing her back. The months that followed weren't easy. Alara had never expected them to be. But they were hers, and that made all the difference. Winter gave way to early spring, and with it came the work of proving she belonged. Not to society, not to the Dowager Duchess, but to herself. She divided her time between Whitford Manor and Ashborough Estate, refusing to abandon the land she'd fought to keep, while learning to navigate the complexities of Darian's world. It was exhausting, exhilarating, terrifying. She made mistakes, forgot which fork to use at formal dinners, called a baroness by the wrong title, laughed too loudly at a political gathering and earned disapproving stares. But she didn't apologize for any of it, just learned, adapted, and kept moving forward. Darian stayed beside her through all of it, steady, patient, amused by her irreverence even when it scandalized his peers. "You called Lord Pembroke's economic theory ridiculous to his face," he said one evening after a particularly tense dinner party. "It was ridiculous. He suggested poor people just need to work harder while he's never worked a day in his life. You're not wrong, but perhaps a gentler phrasing. No. Alara set down her wine. I'm not going to soften the truth to protect powerful men's feelings. If that makes me unsuitable for your world, then your world needs to adjust. He smiled, that private expression he reserved just for her. I love you. Even when I'm embarrassing? Especially then. But not everyone was amused. The Dowager Duchess continued her campaign of subtle sabotage, excluding Alara from family gatherings, spreading whispers about her unsuitability, making pointed comments about temporary infatuations whenever they crossed paths. It stung. Alara wouldn't pretend otherwise, but she'd survived worse than a disapproving mother-in-law. The real blow came in April, when word reached them that several of Darian's political allies had withdrawn their support for a land reform bill he'd been championing. The reason, though unspoken, was clear. His marriage had damaged his credibility. Alara found him in his study, staring at correspondence with an expression she'd never seen before, defeated. This is my fault, she said from the doorway. He looked up, jaw tight. No. Yes, they're punishing you for marrying me. They're being short-sighted idiots. That's not your fault. Darian, Alara, I knew this would happen. I chose it anyway. He stood, moving to the window. What I didn't account for was how much it would actually hurt. Watching men I respected turn their backs because I married someone they deem inappropriate. She crossed to him, taking his hand. We can fix this. How? I don't know yet, but we will. She squeezed his fingers. You believed in me when no one else did. Now let me return this favor. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. I don't regret marrying you. I know, but you regret losing their support. Yes. Then we'll find other support, different support, better support. From where? Alara thought about the letters she'd received, dozens now, from women across the country, about Lady Catherine's grudging respect, about the merchants in her village who'd congratulated her on marrying well but staying herself. From the people they've been ignoring, she said slowly, the ones without titles or power who actually understand what your reforms would mean. The common people won't influence parliamentary votes. Won't they? Those lords have estates, tenants, workers. What happens if those people start demanding the same reforms you're proposing? If they make enough noise that ignoring them becomes politically dangerous? Darian pulled back to look at her. You want to organize a popular movement. I want to show them that dismissing you was a mistake, that the marriage they're using against you is actually your greatest strength. He stopped, mind clearly working. That's brilliant, and potentially impossible. Good thing we specialize in impossible, then. They worked through the night, drafting letters, making plans, reaching out to contacts neither had fully utilized before. Alara wrote to the women who'd sent her encouragement, asking them to spread word about Darian's proposed reforms. Darian contacted estate managers and local officials he'd worked with over the years, people who understood the land and its needs. Within weeks, something unexpected began happening. Petitions started arriving at Parliament, not from lords or ladies, but from farmers, tenants, small landowners, people who wanted the drainage improvements, the fair tenant protections, the agricultural innovations Darian had proposed. The politicians tried to ignore it at first, but the petitions kept coming, hundreds, then thousands, accompanied by peaceful demonstrations, editorials in provincial newspapers, and growing public pressure. Alara watched it build with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She'd sparked this, not through social connections or political maneuvering, but by simply being herself and inspiring others to speak up. They're calling it the Duchess's Crusade, Darian said one morning, reading the newspaper. The reform movement you started. I didn't start anything. I just asked questions. You gave people permission to ask questions, too. That's more powerful than you realize. The backlash was inevitable. Critics accused Alara of manipulating commoners, of using her position inappropriately, of being unsuitable for her role precisely because she refused to stay in her lane. The Dowager Duchess was particularly vicious in her condemnation. You're destroying his reputation, she told Alara at a family gathering Alara couldn't avoid, making him look like a radical, a populist, everything our family stands against. Your family stands for protecting privilege at the expense of everyone else, Alara said calmly. I'm fine with standing against that. You're impertinent. I'm honest. There's a difference. You're ruining him. I'm helping him become who he actually wants to be instead of who you decided he should be. The Duchess's face went white with rage. You presume to know my son better than I do? I know the man he is now. You're still trying to control the boy he used to be. For a moment, Alara thought the older woman might actually strike her. Instead, she drew herself up with icy dignity. This conversation is over. Agreed. But as Alara walked away, she heard the Duchess's voice, quieter now, almost vulnerable. Do you love him? Truly? Alara turned back. More than I thought I could love anyone after losing my first husband. Yes, truly. Even knowing he'll never be fully accepted by society now? That your marriage has cost him standing, influence, respect? He's gained something more valuable, freedom to be himself, partnership instead of performance, a wife who sees him, not his title. Alara met her eyes. Can you say you gave him any of that? The Duchess didn't answer, just turned and walked away, spine rigid, shoulders tight. 2 weeks later, the land reform bill came up for vote. Darian's former allies still opposed it, but enough new voices had joined the debate that the opposition fractured. The bill passed by a narrow margin. It was a small victory, one piece of legislation. But it represented something larger, proof that doing things differently could work, that power didn't have to come from tradition and title alone. The celebration at Ashborough Estate that night was subdued but genuine. Darian's sister attended, a quiet woman named Helena who'd watched the whole saga unfold with cautious interest. I never thought he'd do it, she told Alara. Stand up to Mother, choose his own path. He's braver than people give him credit for. Or you're more influential than you realize. Helena studied her. The letters you've been receiving, from women asking for advice, support, connection. You're building something. I'm just responding to people who write to me. No, you're creating a network. Women who see you as proof they can be themselves and still be loved, still be valued. That's not nothing, Alara. That's power of a different kind. The word stayed with her. Power of a different kind. Not political or social, but personal. The power of example, of refusing to apologize, of showing other women what was possible. She thought about it more as spring deepened into summer. The letters kept coming, more now than ever. Women asking for advice on managing estates, negotiating with creditors, maintaining independence in marriage. Widows who'd lost everything and needed hope that survival was possible. Alara answered every one, shared what she'd learned, connected women who could help each other. Without planning to, she'd created something that felt important, real. You should formalize it, Lady Catherine suggested when they met for tea. Create an actual organization, a network for women to share resources, support each other, learn estate management and financial independence. That sounds complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated. You've already done the hard part, proved it's possible. Now give other women the tools to do it themselves. The idea took root. Alara discussed it with Darian, who immediately offered support, space, resources, connections, but she was careful to keep it separate from his influence. This needed to be hers, built on her own terms. By autumn, she'd established what she called the Whitford Association, named after her estate, not her title, a network of women supporting women in matters of land management, financial independence, and maintaining autonomy within marriage. It started small, a dozen women meeting monthly at Alara's estate to share strategies and support. But word spread. Within months, similar groups were forming across the country. Women teaching each other things society said they didn't need to know, how to read account books, negotiate contracts, manage property. The establishment was horrified. Critics called it dangerous, inappropriate, a threat to the natural order. Alara called it necessary. The confrontation she'd been avoiding finally came in November. A formal gathering at Ashborough Estate, unavoidable, significant, attended by everyone who mattered in Darian's world, including his mother. The Dowager Duchess had been noticeably quiet in recent months. Not supportive, but not actively sabotaging either. Just watching. Calculating. Alara arrived prepared for battle, wore her finest dress, still modest by society standards, but elegant, held her head high, refused to be intimidated. The evening proceeded normally at first. Polite conversations, careful politics, the usual social dance. Then, after dinner, the Duchess requested a private word with both Alara and Darian. They met in the library, neutral ground, private. "I've been thinking," the Duchess said without preamble, "about what you said. About giving him freedom versus controlling him." Alara waited, wary. "You were right." The words clearly cost her. "I've spent years trying to shape him into what I thought he should be, what I thought our family needed, and in doing so I've made him miserable." "Mother," Darian started. "Let me finish." She turned to Alara. "You've given him something I couldn't. Space to be himself, support for who he actually is, and watching him these past months, seeing him happier, more purposeful, more alive, I can't deny that anymore." Alara's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I was wrong. About you. About this marriage. About what my son needs." The Duchess's voice was stiff, formal, but genuine. "I'm asking if we can start over, not as adversaries, but as family." The word hung in the air. Family. Something Alara had lost and never expected to regain. "I don't expect friendship," the Duchess continued. "I know I've done too much damage for that, but perhaps mutual respect? For his sake?" Alara looked at Darian, saw the careful hope in his expression. This mattered to him, more than he'd admitted. "Mutual respect," she agreed slowly, "and honesty. No more sabotage disguised as concern." "Agreed." "And recognition that I'm not going anywhere. This marriage is permanent. I understand that now." "Then, yes, we can start over." The Duchess nodded, just once, sharp and decisive. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and took Alara's hand. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for making him happy, for giving him courage, for being exactly what he needed, even when I couldn't see it." It wasn't a full apology, but it was acknowledgement, recognition, the beginning of peace. When they left the library, Darian pulled Alara aside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving her a chance. You could have held the grudge. She deserved it." "Probably. But holding grudges is exhausting, and I've got better things to do with my energy." Alara smiled. "Besides, you need your family. I won't be the reason you lose them. You're my family now, too." "I know, but families can expand, not just replace." He kissed her, gentle and grateful. "How did I get so lucky?" "You stopped a carriage from killing me. Pure chance. Best accident of my life." The winter brought new challenges. It always did. But Alara faced them differently now, not alone, not desperate. Supported, partnered, part of something larger than herself. The Whitford Association grew. By year's end, there were chapters in 15 counties. Women learning to manage their own affairs, support each other, refuse to be erased by marriage or widowhood or society's expectations. Alara's estate flourished. With proper resources and help, which Darian provided without making her feel indebted, she restored the gardens, repaired the house, made it profitable again. It remained hers, managed independently, but no longer a burden she carried alone. Her relationship with the Dowager Duchess slowly, carefully improved. They'd never be close, but they found common ground in loving the same man and wanting him happy. That was enough. And Darian thrived. With Alara's support, he pushed through more reforms, built coalitions among people his peers had dismissed, proved that a different kind of leadership was possible. "You've changed me," he told her one evening as they walked through the gardens at Whitford Manor, now blooming again, restored to something resembling their former glory. "You changed yourself. I just gave you permission." "That's the same thing." "Maybe." They stopped by this fountain, running again, water catching the last light of the setting sun. Alara had thought this place dead beyond saving. She'd been wrong. "Do you regret it?" Darian asked. "Any of it?" "The dinner party with your mother was rough." "Besides that," Alara considered. The fear, the uncertainty, the battles fought and still to come, the loss of the quiet, controlled life she'd built after Thomas died, the chaos of loving someone again, risking everything again. "No," she said. I don't regret any of it. Even though it's complicated? Especially because it's complicated. Simple was safe, but lonely. This is messy and terrifying and absolutely real. She took his hand. I'll take real over safe any day. That's good, because I'm planning to keep complicating your life for a very long time. How long? Forever sounds about right. Forever's a long time. I'm aware. She smiled, kissed him, let herself feel the fullness of everything they'd built. Not perfect, not smooth, but theirs. 3 years later, Ilara stood in the same library where she'd first found Darian examining Thomas's books. But now the room was filled with women, 20 of them, representing Whitford Association chapters from across the country. They'd gathered to plan the next year's initiatives, share resources, celebrate progress. Ilara watched them debate and strategize and support each other and felt something like awe. She'd helped create this, not through title or money or social position, but by refusing to disappear, by insisting she could be herself and still be valued. Mrs. Hewitt appeared in the doorway, older now, but still sharp-eyed. "There's someone here to see you," she said. Ilara excused herself, found a young woman waiting in the hall, maybe 20, thin and nervous, wearing a widow's black. "Mrs. Duchess, I'm sorry, I don't know what to call you." "Ilara is fine." "Ilara, I'm Sarah Monroe. I lost my husband 6 months ago, left with an estate I don't know how to manage and debts I can't pay." Her voice trembled. "I heard about what you did, how you survived. I was hoping maybe you could teach me?" Ilara saw herself in this girl, saw the fear and determination and desperate hope that survival was possible. "Yes," she said, "I can teach you and introduce you to others who can help. You're not alone in this." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The work's hard. But if you're willing to fight for yourself, we'll fight with you." Later, after the women had left and the house was quiet, Ilara found Darian in the parlor, the same settee where she'd first tended his injuries. "You helped another one today, Rob," he said. It wasn't a question. "I did." "How many now?" "Lost count, hundreds probably, through the association and personal connections." "You're changing the world. You know that?" "I'm just helping women survive." "That is changing the world." He pulled her down beside him. "You've built something extraordinary, Ilara. Power that doesn't depend on title or wealth. Just truth and example. We built it, together. No, I supported you. But this is yours. The impact you've made, the women you've helped, the network you've created, that's all you." Ilara leaned against him, let herself acknowledge it. She'd done something that mattered, not by being perfect or playing by society's rules, but by refusing to break. By surviving, thriving, and showing others it was possible. "Do you remember," she said, "that day on the road, when I stopped your carriage?" Every detail. "I thought I was just preventing an accident. Had no idea it would lead to all this." "Do you wish you'd known?" "No. I might have run if I'd known how complicated it would get. And that would have been a tragedy. For you, maybe. For both of us. For all the women you've helped. For the reforms we've passed. For everything we've built." He kissed her temple. "Sometimes the best things come from split-second decisions we don't fully understand until later. Sometimes they come from refusing to move when anyone sane would run. That too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the gardens bloomed in the spring darkness. Inside, the house stood solid and warm, no longer a burden, but a home. Ilara thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. Alone, struggling, convinced she'd never risk her heart again. That woman wouldn't recognize who she'd become. Wife, duchess, advocate, leader of a movement she'd never intended to start. But she'd recognize the core, the stubbornness, the refusal to break, the certainty that survival mattered, and fighting for it was always worth the cost. "I love you," she told Darian. "I know you show me every day." "How?" "By being yourself, exactly as you are, complicated, stubborn, brilliant, impossible." He smiled. "Perfect in your absolute imperfection." That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." "I've been practicing." She laughed, kissed him, let herself feel the weight and warmth of everything they'd survived to get here. The battles fought, the victories won. The life built on their own terms, defying everyone's expectations, including their own. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she stopped that carriage on a cold autumn road. It was better, messier, more real. And standing at her window later that night, watching the moon rise over land she'd fought to keep and finally made flourish, Alara understood something she'd been too scared to acknowledge before. Power wasn't inherited or bestowed. It was claimed, built, earned through the simple act of refusing to disappear, of demanding to be seen and valued exactly as you were. She'd stopped a carriage and saved a man's life. In return, he'd helped her save her own, not by rescuing her, but by standing beside her while she rescued herself. Together, they'd rewritten the rules, proved that strength came in forms society didn't recognize, that a widow and a duke could build something neither could create alone, that love, real love, didn't require perfection, just courage, honesty, the willingness to choose each other every day, despite complications and consequences. The road ahead would have its challenges. There would be more battles, more critics, more moments of doubt. But Alara had learned the most important lesson. She didn't have to face any of it alone. She'd built a network of women who supported each other, a marriage that honored both partners, a life that was entirely, authentically hers. And that, messy, complicated, impossibly real, was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. The woman who'd refused to break had finally learned to bend, to open, to trust. And in doing so, she'd become something far more powerful than she'd ever been alone. Herself, fully realized, unapologetically whole. The story that began with chaos on a lonely road had become something neither Alara nor Darian could have predicted, a quiet revolution. A partnership that challenged everything society thought it knew about power, marriage, and who deserved to claim both. Years from now, people would tell the story differently, make it romantic, simple, neat. But Alara would remember the truth. It was hard, frightening, worth every terrifying moment. She'd faced a runaway carriage and chosen to stand her ground. She'd faced an impossible love and chosen to take the risk. She'd faced a world that said she didn't belong and chosen to remake it instead. And in the end, that choice, that refusal to accept limitations placed on her by others, made all the difference. Not because it was easy, because it was real. And real, however imperfect, was always worth fighting for.